The Mediterranean sun sets over Alexandria's harbor, painting the water in hues of gold and violet, and beneath these gentle waves lies a silence that speaks volumes. What if the greatest treasure lost to time wasn't gold or jewels, but something far more precious? What if the sea didn't claim a city of stone, but a universe of thought? This is not the story of a queen's treasure, but of a kingdom of the mind, a realm where the collective knowledge of the ancient world once gathered. As the modern city lights twinkle to life above, the ruins below rest in eternal twilight, holding secrets that have captivated scholars for centuries. The whispers of papyrus scrolls and the echoes of philosophical debates now mingle with the sway of seaweed and the slow dance of sediment. What remains of this intellectual paradise, and what can its silent stones tell us about the fragile nature of human achievement? The Lost World, The Rise. Imagine a place where the known world converged, not for trade alone, but for thought, where the air hummed with the energy of 1,000 minds pursuing truth. The Mouseion of Alexandria was more than a library, it was a temple to knowledge, a living organism of intellectual pursuit that drew the greatest thinkers like moths to a flame. Here, beneath colonnaded walkways open to the sea breeze, scholars from Athens, Rome, Babylon, and beyond would stroll and debate everything from the nature of the stars to the geometry of a circle. The sound of scribes carefully copying texts mingled with the distant cry of gulls, creating a symphony of human advancement. The Ptolemies didn't just want a library, they wanted a perfect copy of the world, captured in ink and papyrus. Their ambition knew no borders. Every ship that docked in Alexandria's magnificent harbor was searched not for contraband, but for scrolls. These precious texts would be copied by teams of scribes working in shifts by oil lamp light, the originals kept for the great library's collection while the copies were returned to their owners. This systematic, almost obsessive gathering of knowledge created a repository that likely contained works by Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, and countless others whose names are lost to us. The royal quarter adjacent to the library complex became a living extension of this intellectual paradise, where philosophers dined with royalty and astronomers debated with engineers. But this beacon of light was fragile, existing at the mercy of politics and the elements. The very location that made Alexandria great, its position between the Mediterranean and Lake Mareotis, would ultimately contribute to its vulnerability. The city stood on land that was partly reclaimed from the sea, built upon layers of sediment that time and pressure would prove unstable. Yet during its golden age, Alexandria represented humanity's boldest attempt to comprehend the cosmos through reason and observation. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy within these walls. Archimedes developed his revolutionary inventions here. The physician Herophilus pioneered human dissection, advancing medical knowledge by leaps. Each discovery built upon the last, creating an accelerating momentum of understanding that must have felt like it would continue forever. The royal libraries, possibly located in the palace district near the harbor, would have been especially magnificent, rooms with vaulted ceilings where sunlight filtered through high windows, illuminating shelves that stretched into shadowed corners. Here, Cleopatra VII herself would have walked, the last of the Ptolemaic rulers to preside over this incredible institution. She, who spoke multiple languages and studied mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, represented the culmination of this intellectual dynasty. The scent of papyrus, ink, and cedarwood from the cases would have filled the air, a perfume of wisdom that now exists only in imagination. The vibrant discussions, the rustle of scrolls, the intense concentration of readers, this was a living, breathing ecosystem of knowledge, a fragile flower that bloomed brilliantly but briefly in the coastal sands of Egypt. The mystery, the disappearance. The end did not come with a bang, but with a slow, inexorable sigh, a gradual dimming of the great light that Alexandria had represented. The decline of the library and its associated institutions was not a single event but a cascade of misfortunes spanning centuries, each one chipping away at the foundation of this intellectual empire. The first significant blow likely came during Julius Caesar's Alexandrian War in 48 BCE, when fires spread through the dockside areas where scrolls were stored awaiting shipment or copying. Though the main library complex may have survived, countless volumes housed in warehouses near the harbor were lost to the flames, a tragedy that foreshadowed greater losses to come. Political instability became a constant threat to the library's survival as Rome's influence grew and Egypt's autonomy waned. The Mausian, dependent on royal patronage, suffered when rulers had more pressing concerns than funding scholars. By the time of Cleopatra's death and the Roman annexation of Egypt, the institution was already shadows of its former self. The Roman emperors had varying attitudes toward this treasure they had inherited. Some, like Augustus, maintained it as a symbol of imperial prestige, while others neglected it in favor of institutions in Rome itself. The knowledge remained, but the vibrant, innovative spirit that had characterized the Ptolemaic era gradually faded, like a color photograph slowly bleaching in the sun. The sea did not attack, it simply accepted what the land could no longer hold. Alexandria's greatest vulnerability was the very ground it stood upon. Built on a narrow strip of land between the Mediterranean and Lake Mareotis, with parts actually reclaimed from the sea, the city's foundations were a complex mixture of natural and man-made materials. Over centuries, a combination of rising sea levels, soil liquefaction, and seismic activity caused entire sections of the city's royal quarter to gradually subside beneath the waves. Earthquakes, particularly those in the 4th and 8th centuries CE, likely accelerated this process, causing portions of the coastline to simply collapse into the Mediterranean. So, was it fire, war, or the earth itself that claimed the libraries? The truth lies in the layers, both geological and historical. The famous library of Alexandria likely diminished through 1,000 small losses rather than one catastrophic destruction. As Christianity gained prominence, classical knowledge fell out of favor, and funding for pagan institutions dried up. The Serapeum, a daughter library or temple that may have housed part of the Great Library's collection, was destroyed by a Christian mob in 391 CE, possibly representing another significant loss. But the physical structures of the royal quarter, including any remaining libraries or archives, continued their slow descent into the sea, a process that continued for centuries, almost imperceptible to those living above the waterline. The subsidence was so gradual that people living in Alexandria might not have even noticed it happening within their lifetimes. A building that once stood proudly overlooking the harbor might, over 100 years, find its lower floors frequently flooded until eventually being abandoned to the encroaching sea. The process would have been uneven, some areas sinking faster than others, creating a ghostly landscape of half-submerged structures that sailors might have glimpsed through clear water on calm days. The knowledge of what lay beneath the waves would have passed from generation to generation as local legend, until even that memory faded and the sunken city became pure myth. This slow-motion tragedy presents a different kind of mystery than a sudden cataclysm. There was no single moment to mourn, no clear villain to blame. Instead, the sea claimed Alexandria's intellectual heart through a combination of geological inevitability and human neglect. The very gradualness of the loss meant that there was no dramatic last stand, no heroic effort to save the scrolls, just a quiet acceptance as room after room, building after building, surrendered to the Mediterranean. The water would have seeped in slowly at first, damaging the lower shelves of scrolls, then rising gradually until the great halls were completely submerged, their priceless contents dissolving into pulp as seawater saturated the papyrus. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that we don't know exactly what was lost. The Library of Alexandria likely contained not only the great works of Greek and Roman civilization, but also translations of texts from other cultures, Persian, Indian, Hebrew, and African works that might have provided entirely different perspectives on history, science, and philosophy. These works, known only through references in other texts, represent gaps in our understanding of the ancient world that can never be filled. The loss represents not just the destruction of knowledge, but the narrowing of human perspective, entire ways of thinking that vanished when those scrolls dissolved into the sea. For centuries, it was a legend, a story scholars told with a mixture of skepticism and longing. Then, in the 1990s, a team of underwater archaeologists led by Frank Goddio began to systematically survey the waters of Alexandria's eastern harbor. Using advanced technology like magnetometers and side-scan sonar, they started to map what lay beneath the sediment, and what they found would rewrite our understanding of ancient Alexandria. The first discoveries were fragmentary: blocks of stone, pieces of columns, pottery shards. But as the team continued their painstaking work, larger structures began to emerge from the murky depths, the outlines of buildings, streets, and even grand monuments that had not been seen by human eyes for over 1,000 years. What they pulled from the silt were not answers, but deeper questions made of stone. The most dramatic discoveries included colossal statues of Ptolemaic rulers and Egyptian gods, a 16-foot-tall statue of a king believed to be Ptolemy II, a magnificent head of the god Serapis, and a queenly figure thought to represent Cleopatra's ancestor, Arsinoe II. These sculptures, though worn by centuries underwater, still conveyed the power and grandeur of the civilization that created them. But perhaps more telling were the smaller finds, everyday objects that hinted at the lives of the people who inhabited this sunken world: gold jewelry, bronze coins, ceramic vessels, and even fragments of furniture. The archaeological work revealed that a significant portion of the ancient city's royal quarter, an area encompassing palaces, temples, and administrative buildings, now lies beneath the harbor. The team mapped out an entire submerged island, Antirodos, which housed a royal palace and a small port. Nearby, they found the remains of the Timonium, a retreat built by Mark Antony, and the Poseidium, a temple dedicated to Poseidon. The layout that emerged from the silt suggested a sophisticated urban landscape with grand avenues, public spaces, and private villas, all now home to coral and marine life. Each artifact is a single word from a book whose pages have dissolved. The underwater environment, while destructive to organic materials like papyrus, has paradoxically preserved stone and metal objects in remarkable condition. The lack of oxygen in the sediment has prevented corrosion, leaving bronze statues with fine details still visible. The very mud that buried the city has acted as a protective blanket, shielding these artifacts from the destructive force of waves and currents. As archaeologists carefully excavated these finds, they were essentially reading a city that had been frozen in time, not by volcanic ash like Pompeii, but by the slow, gentle embrace of the sea. The discovery of the sunken city has forced historians to reconsider what they thought they knew about ancient Alexandria. The scale and luxury of the submerged structures confirm ancient descriptions of the city's magnificence that were previously thought to be exaggerated. The presence of both Egyptian and Greek architectural elements and artifacts illustrates the unique cultural fusion that characterized Ptolemaic rule. But for all these revelations, the greatest treasure, the libraries and their contents, remains elusive. The organic materials that would have comprised scrolls and codices have long since disappeared, leaving only stone and ceramic evidence of the intellectual life that once flourished here. The modern exploration of these ruins has been a race against time. Pollution, coastal development, and natural erosion threatened the fragile underwater site. Archaeologists work methodically, knowing that each object they document provides another piece of the puzzle, but also aware that much has already been lost forever. The mapping of the sunken city continues to this day, with new technologies like 3D photogrammetry allowing for the creation of detailed digital models of the underwater ruins. These models not only aid research but also allow the public to virtually explore what divers can see, a ghostly landscape where ancient columns stand like sentinels guarding secrets they cannot reveal. The most poignant aspect of these discoveries is what they represent, the physical manifestation of loss. Seeing the actual stones of the royal quarter lying on the seabed makes the tragedy of the library's destruction feel more immediate and tangible. These are not just stories, these are the remains of a world that valued knowledge above almost all else. The careful excavation of these ruins becomes an act of reverence, an attempt to understand not just what was lost, but what it meant to the people who created it, and what its loss means for us today.